We are on to lesson 10, which is another lesson all about sight. For this flipped classroom lesson, you're going to need your root card, the materials to complete your choice of vocab strategy, and if you'd like, you can follow along on page 63 of your workbook. Remember, you're choosing between note cards, vocab connections, word pyramids, and vocab visuals. Here we go. Our first root in lesson 10 is specto. Specto means to look at. Make sure that you add specto to your root card. Now, you'll notice that specto's definition to look at is very similar to both the definitions listed here already on the card, to exhibit and to see. I would really recommend during this lesson thinking of tips so that you can remember the difference between all of these roots that have to do with sight, because their definitions are really similar. And the next definition is also very similar. So coming up with some sort of trick or hint to help yourself is going to be really beneficial as we go through these roots. The first word that uses specto is auspicious. Auspicious is an adjective. It's a describing word that means showing signs that promise success. For example, Sally's latest vocabulary score was an auspicious indicator to her parents that she was doing better. In the book it reads, "The sunny morning was an auspicious beginning for our class picnic." For this lesson, we've included some reflections or things to think about to help you remember these words. So it's time to think about, when is the last time you got an auspicious test score or assignment grade? And if you can kind of recall an instance, maybe it'll help you remember the definition for this word. Please pause the video at any time. We're going to move on to our second word, which is introspection. Now, clearly this word uses the root specto because you can see it right there in the word. It's a noun, and it means examination of one's own thoughts and feelings. So a timeout is often a time for introspection. It's a time to think about what you've done. Don't forget to add this word to your vocab strategy, and do definitely note that this is a noun. It'll be used as a noun in any sentences that you'll need to fill in the blanks for. The sentence in the book reads, "Experience may help us to understand others, but without introspection, we will never understand our own motives." So if you want to think about this word and connect to this word, sometimes at the start of a new year, people practice introspection by setting New Year's resolutions. They kind of think about their own lives, they really reflect on their own feelings, and they make some goals for themselves. So were you introspective in January? Did you set any resolutions for yourself? We're going to move on to our next word, which is kind of similar to this word. It's retrospect. Retrospect is also a noun, and it means a survey of past time or events. So again, kind of looking back, reflecting. In retrospect, I probably didn't need the second pizza. In the book it reads, "In retrospect, I wish I had chosen an instrument like the flute when I joined the band rather than this heavy, awkward tuba." So it's thinking back and surveying or reflecting on something that's happened in the past. What is something that you could would change if you could about your past in retrospect? So if you were to kind of look back, is there anything that you regret? Is there anything that you would change? And of course, don't forget to add this to your vocab strategy as well. There are a lot of words that we're going to learn in this lesson that go along with this root. So we're going to move on to the fourth word, which is specimen. Specimen is also a noun, and it means a single thing that is taken as a sample of a whole category. In science, we had to look at specimens under the microscope. You may have heard this word being used in science class, as it often is. And you can kind of think of a time when you had to study a specimen to help you remember. The sentence in the book reads, "The Apollo astronauts gathered specimens of rock to determine the chemical composition of the moon." So they gathered small samplings of the rocks to really represent the rocks on the moon as a whole. Our fifth word that uses specto is specter, another noun, which means a ghost or a haunting fear of future trouble. Casper was a very friendly specter is a simple example of how this word might be used. In your book, it reads, local legend claims that the specter haunts the chapel. So there's a ghost that haunts the chapel. And you could also, of course, use this as a haunting fear of future trouble. So after hail destroyed the corn crop, the specter of famine loomed over the village. So the fear of future trouble loomed over the village. And just as a reflection, a time to think, do you believe in specters? Do you believe in ghosts? Our sixth word that uses specto is spectrum, another noun. Then we have a lot of nouns in this lesson. Spectrum has two definitions, and you can write down both. You will see both being used often. It can mean the distribution of characteristics of a physical system, especially bands of color seen as a rainbow or bands of differing sound waves. And that's kind of what's shown in the picture up at the top of the screen. It can also mean a wide range of related qualities or ideas, which is kind of shown in the sentence here. It says, with the exception of heavy metal, I listen to a full spectrum of music. I listen to a wide range of music. Looking at that first definition, you could say the light refracted through a crystal and showed all colors of the spectrum. So another kind of science term when used in that context. And you can kind of think for yourself, do you enjoy a wide spectrum of music? We have one more word that uses the root specto, and the word is speculate. Speculate's a noun, and it means to form opinions without definite knowledge or evidence, or to buy or sell something to make a profit but risk of loss. And looking at that first definition, rumors get started when people speculate, when they form opinions or they share ideas without having evidence. Another sentence, as seen in your book, human beings have long speculated about life on other planets. May not necessarily have any definite knowledge or evidence, but we've speculated that there might be life on other planets. You could also say, she made and then lost a fortune speculating on the stock market. And as you can guess, that goes along with that second definition. And I'd say the first is a little bit more common of a definition that's used, just so you know. And you can think, what grade do you speculate you will receive on the next vocabulary quiz? At this point, you should have 7 words that fall under the root specto. We're going to move on to our next and final root for this lesson, and there are 3 more words that go along with this root. As a reminder, the quiz coming up is going to be over the words from lessons 9 and 10, as well as the roots from the beginning of the year. So make sure you're studying all of that material in preparation for this upcoming quiz. The next root is vigilo, and it means to watch. And I wrote a little tip here, which I kind of mentioned in the beginning of the video. You may want to figure out a way to remember the difference between these very similar roots. We have to see, to look at, and to watch, all having to do with sight and very, very similar. So if you can come up with a way to help yourself remember the difference between video, specto, and vigilo, it's going to be really helpful for you when you get to the quiz. Make sure you're adding this to your root card so you have all your definitions in one place. We're going to move on to the first word that uses this root, which is surveillance, a word you've probably heard before. It's a noun and it means supervision or close observation, especially of a suspected person. So catching the suspect took a large amount of surveillance from the authorities, close supervision, watching. And you've probably heard this word being used in reference to a surveillance camera. So you could think of somewhere that you've seen a surveillance camera before. The sentence in the book reads, as soon as a candidate for the President of the United States is nominated, he or she is immediately placed under Secret Service surveillance. There's people watching them and protecting them very closely. Don't forget to add this word to your vocab strategy before we move on to our second to last word, which is vigil. You'll notice there are a lot of nouns in this lesson, so knowing which words are not nouns, there's actually 2 adjectives in this lesson and 1 verb, it's really going to help you when you get to the sentence portion of your quiz. A vigil is a period of staying awake to keep watch or to pray. On Halloween, the old man across the street would keep vigil on his lawn to make sure no teenagers trespassed. If you take a look at the pictures on this screen, the picture at the top kind of shows a gathering of people that are staying awake to pray or to mourn something with candles. And then that picture on the bottom shows the old man watching over his lawn. You could try and think of another time when someone may need to keep vigil. The next word sounds very similar to vigil. It's vigilant, and this is an adjective form of vigil. So it's a describing word which means watchful or on the lookout for danger. And I always think of meerkats when I hear this word, which are the animals pictured on the screen, because they're always poking their heads up above the prairie grass and looking out for animals that could be dangerous to them. We had to remain vigilant when camping in the deep woods. We had to keep watch. We had to look out for bears or other dangers. There are a lot of animals that you could describe as vigilant. Your book talks about a red-tailed hawk being vigilant and attacking any intruders that approach their nests. So maybe you can think of another animal that you could describe as vigilant to help you remember this word. At this point, you should have 2 new roots written down on your root card, as well as 10 total words for this lesson. And again, just that tip about making sure you can distinguish between the roots that have very similar definitions that are all about sight. Thanks for listening.